carry this quiet, persistent conviction that the world around you is trapped in an invisible prison of its own making? Well, you're exactly where you need to be. So many of us carry this heavy, lifelong feeling of just not belonging. And honestly, it can feel like a flaw, right? Like a glitch in your own wiring. But today, we're going to break down why that intense isolation is not a defect at all. In fact, it is the sign of a profound psychological awakening. You're experiencing what Carl Jung called the burden of consciousness, basically carrying an awareness that most of humanity is simply too terrified to even look at.
Let me ask you to pause for a second, and I want you to be brutally honest right now. How many times have you sat in a crowded room, surrounded by conversations, surrounded by people you technically know, and felt completely and utterly alone? If ordinary socializing feels far more draining to you than sitting in total silence, you really need to understand the psychological war you've just been drafted into.
All right, part 1, the frequency mismatch. Let's dive right into this explainer and look at that strange, persistent hum of awareness you feel, an intense frequency that ordinary radios just simply can't pick up.
You know the feeling. You pick up on things that everyone else just seems to completely ignore. You think clearly about things others have absolutely no patience to even consider. You're carrying this quiet, persistent awareness right beneath the surface of your daily life. And for your entire life, society has probably labeled this intensity as a flaw. They tell you you're overthinking, that you're way too intense, or just antisocial. But Carl Jung, literally one of the most brilliant psychological minds of the 20th century, realized this exact experience is not a disorder. Actually, it's a sign of healthy psychological differentiation. You're just becoming your own distinct person. So that brings us to part 2, the shared cloud. This concept explains exactly why breaking away from the crowd feels so intensely isolating in the first place.
Jung understood something absolutely fascinating about human nature. He drew on the work of anthropologist Lucien Levy-Bruhl, who coined the term participation mystique. Now, what this means is that most human beings live their entire lives completely merged with a shared unconscious cloud. Inside this cloud, ordinary people don't actually experience themselves as separate from the group. They just agree to feel what the collective feels and see exactly what the collective sees. So look, if you feel alienated, it just means you've broken out of this cloud. You've stepped outside the agreed-upon illusion. Because you've differentiated from the herd, your inner world has developed a gravity that the external world simply cannot compete with. Your inner depth is literally pulling you away from the superficial, surface level of daily life. All that small talk, the forced smiles, the surface-level obsessions, they lose their gravitational pull because you've discovered an entire universe of depth within yourself. Okay, moving on to part 3, the invisible war. Because breaking free from the collective isn't exactly a peaceful experience. This is where we uncover the brutal systemic pushback that happens when you wake up in a sleeping society. What's truly wild about this is how every healthy group actually relies on this concept to function: managed blindness. Whether we're talking about a family unit, a corporate workplace, or a local community, groups function partly through shared agreements about what will absolutely not be acknowledged. It's an unspoken pact to just smooth things over and ignore uncomfortable truths, solely so the daily routine can keep going. And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of the invisible war. On one side, you have the collective group, which actively demands comfortable blindness. On the other side, you have the awakened individual, you, carrying the burden of consciousness. Because you're no longer merged with the group, you can't participate in this blindness anymore. You walk into a room and you instantly sense the tension, the unspoken anger, the unacknowledged darkness that everyone else is furiously agreeing to ignore. But here's what happens when you reflect that unacknowledged darkness back to the group. They do not thank you for your honesty. No, they attack the mirror. This is the tragic, age-old dynamic of the scapegoat. A group organized around a shared lie will always experience your truth as a dangerous intrusion. They'll actually blame you for creating the tension that you are merely observing.
And this isn't just about awkward office politics or family drama. We can raise the cosmological stakes a bit here. Ancient Gnostics called the force behind this collective unconsciousness the Demiurge. It's an archetypal force that rules the material world through ignorance, constant distraction, and a relentless pull toward a surface-level existence. The Demiurge desperately wants you fighting visible external battles against other people, just so the real internal psychological war for your own awakening goes entirely unfought. Because you see right through the distractions of the Demiurge. You live in what Jung called the burden of consciousness. You exist in this agonizing gap
where you are seeing clearly, but you're constantly told you're imagining things. You're feeling incredibly deeply, but you're told you're just overreacting. You know fundamental truths about situations, but you're told you cannot possibly know them. It creates immense cognitive dissonance and, honestly, massive isolation.
I mean, just think about the absolute irony of our modern culture for a second. We spend billions of dollars on meditation apps, burning sage, and, as that $40 price tag perfectly highlights, expensive lavender bath bombs, all to try and find inner peace. Jung would literally laugh at this. You cannot fix a profound structural collapse of the ego and a cosmic battle against collective unconsciousness with a $40 bath bomb.
So no, you don't need a spa day. You need the courage to let your false identities die completely. Surviving this war requires genuine, deep psychological transformation, not just temporary relaxation. It requires stepping into the fire of who you really are and burning away all the parts of you that are desperately trying to please the sleeping collective.
Which leads us to the final phase of our explainer, Part 4, True Internal Authority. How do you survive the crushing isolation of this invisible war and actually claim your power? You do it by stepping into true internal authority. To survive, you have to fully commit to the psychological process Jung called individuation. First things first, stop trying to force yourself back into the collective cloud. It won't work, and honestly, it will only make you sick. Second, you have to shift from being an unconscious absorber to a conscious observer. And third, you need to develop strong psychological containers. Let's break those last two steps down.
You really have to make this fundamental shift. You must stop acting as a psychological sponge, an unconscious absorber who just takes on the shadow material and toxic emotions of every single room you walk into. Instead, you have to become a conscious observer with a strong psychological container. This means developing the ability to be fully present to the complexity and darkness of others without losing your own sense of self in it. Basically, you learn to observe the storm without letting the rain inside your house. And when you build that container, something pretty magical happens. The agonizing gap between your deep awareness and the world's unconsciousness doesn't close because the world finally catches up to your level of awareness. No, the agonizing gap closes because you stop needing it to close. You stop waiting for everyone else to wake up just so that you can finally feel validated. So here is the crucial point. This is true internal authority. It means your inner knowing no longer requires external confirmation to feel valid. True freedom happens when you stop over-explaining your depth to people who are entirely committed to misunderstanding you. When your psyche finally comes to rest in its own authority, you become a bridge, someone who carries the light of consciousness without needing the rest of the world to applaud you for it.
Now, in the symbolic language of quantum consciousness and deep archetypal frameworks, the number 777 represents the exact moment your inner truth perfectly aligns with outer reality. It is the moment you finally stop trying to fit into a false world and trust your own internal signal. So if you're ready to stop fighting your own depth, leave a 777 in the comments below. Use it as a marker to officially claim your frequency.
The invisible war is fought in every single moment that you refuse to surrender your perception to the collective sleep. You are not broken, you're awake. So the only question left is, will you trust the quiet signal inside you, endure the sacred loneliness, and step into the fierce freedom of a mind that has finally awakened?